it is in the fluid state, isn't it? So, and it is maintained in the fluid state because, see, it has water that is in the plasma. We have clotting factors, we have plasma proteins like albumin, globulin, prothrombin, fibrinogen, and so many other minerals we find in the blood along with hemoglobin. So, basically, in a normal natural flowing blood, we are not finding the formation of clot because there should be some injury or some obstruction in the normal flow of a blood vessel. Okay, you just imagine like this is a blood vessel. Okay, suppose whatever blood vessel we have, like we have seen veins and arteries, no? So inside these blood vessel, the blood is moving. So there should be some cut over here, or inside the lumen there should be something like atherosclerosis or arteriosclerosis, because of which the lumen of the blood vessel should be narrow. Some of any of the triggering factor should be there. Once the triggering factor is there, you will see in the blood we have around 13 clotting factors. These 13 clotting factors will become active one by one, and they just get stick to each other, and it leads to the formation of blood clot in order to arrest the flow of blood if, in case if there is any injury. Okay, that is the normal mechanism of coagulation of blood. Okay, coagulation or clotting is defined as process in which blood loses its fluidity. Okay, basically blood is maintained in fluid condition. It becomes a jelly-like mass few minutes after it is shed out or collected in a container. Like generally when we give blood sample for any investigation, generally you see in that container already pre-loaded heparin or EDTA or some anticoagulant will be there, so that the blood is maintained in a fluid state. But if you have seen any animal sacrifices, once the blood is falling on the ground, you generally see the blood becomes clotted. That means all clotting factors will come closer and they get stick together to form a jelly-like mass that is nothing but blood clot. Okay, now the factors involved in blood clotting. So you have to memorize all these 13 clotting factors. Factor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Names also. Suppose for example, factor 1 is fibrinogen, factor 2 is prothrombin, 3 thromboplastin, and so on. Okay, so these are the factors you have to memorize. Once you memorize these factors, then we have two different mechanisms which are taking place inside our blood vessels to bring about this fibrin clot. So for this, what you have to do is again memorize this flowchart and put it into your words. I'll tell you how to make it. So we have intrinsic pathway and extrinsic pathway. Intrinsic pathway in the sense, here you do not have, the blood vessel is not truly cut. Instead, if you remember the structure of a capillary from histology, the capillary is lined with only endothelial cells, isn't it? If you take artery, arteriole, vein, venule, histologically we have three walls, no? Tunica intima, tunica media, and tunica adventitia. And inside the lumen, blood will be flowing. Is that okay, beta Abhinav? Are you understanding?
Yes, ma'am.
Huh. So in case of capillary, you don't find tunica adventitia, you don't find tunica media, we find only tunica intima. In that intima also, only we will find basement membrane. Resting over the basement membrane, we have endothelial cells. Okay. So suppose if these endothelial cells are damaged, the basement membrane will have collagen fibers. So that collagen fibers are getting exposed. So there should be some injury. So if it is inside the blood vessel without any true cut outside, you call it as intrinsic pathway. Okay, if you find there is true cut outside, there should be some tissue trauma, then that is called as extrinsic pathway. So we have two different mechanisms, but ultimately the goal is the formation of fibrin. Okay, now when you come with intrinsic pathway, so like whenever there is endothelial damage and exposure of collagen, the kallikrein and high molecular weight kininogen, they will convert the clotting factor 12 to 12A. So and from there, the high molecular weight kininogen, then now 11th factor is converted to 11th. A means activated factor, and it goes on. You can easily frame these factors into sentences. And finally, you will see. So this is intrinsic pathway, and in this intrinsic pathway, you will see thrombin is now entering in stage 2, like prothrombin is converted to thrombin. Okay, once the thrombin is formed, it is further activating more and more prothrombin activator to convert prothrombin to thrombin. Okay, so that is intrinsic. No, extrinsic pathway, tissue trauma, you will see the release of tissue thromboplastin. Then we have glycoprotein, phospholipid. Okay, then seventh clotting factor. Then calcium is which clotting factor? Yesterday also I told Imad.
Factor 4.
Very good, factor 4. Okay, so you are finding series of steps, and finally, so you will see the thrombin is formed in stage 2, and this thrombin is acting on fibrinogen. This thrombin, fibrinogen, these are all proteins which are present in the blood, and with the help of these clotting factors, those proteins are getting activated step by step, and fibrinogen A is now converted to loose strands of fibrin, okay, by polymerization. Then you will see 13th clotting factor and calcium. In the presence of these factors, we will see the formation of tight clot, that is fibrin. Okay, that is the blood clot. Okay, so you need to elaborate this cycle in for this essay answer. Apart from that, we also have fibrinolytic mechanism. So fibrinolytic mechanism, in the sense, see, this is the fibrinolytic mechanism. Now, why the fibrinolysis should happen? Suppose if it is intravascular blood clot, you should have heard about stroke, isn't it? Where any of we have seen blood supply of brain, anterior cerebral artery, middle cerebral artery, posterior. So in these blood vessels, any of the blood vessels, there will be formation of blood clot. So if there is any blood clot, what happens? Initially, there is a condition which is called as TIA, transient ischemic attack. Not all the people who are suffering with the obstruction of blood vessels are developing hemiplegia. Okay, so if it is what is transient? Is transient means temporary. Ischemia means non-availability of blood supply. Attack, TIA, you can make a note, transient ischemic attack. So that condition, that means inside the lumen of blood vessel, that clot is there, but our body has a mechanism to dissolve the clot, or if the patient is coming to us in time, we give thrombolytic drugs in order to dissolve the clot and to resume the circulation in the brain, so that person will have paralysis, but the person will recover within a span of 24 hours. Okay, it is not like a permanent paralysis where you will see hemiplegia will be there, right side of the body or left side of the body is paralyzed. Not like that. Okay, so that condition is transient ischemic attack. Hope you understood. So that is one thing you should understand. That is the significance of fibrinolytic mechanism. Apart from that also, suppose if there is outside there is some injury, you are seeing the blood clot is formed. Again, after some time, you will see it gets dissolved and the fluid moves out. Something like that. That means that is the fibrinolytic mechanism. So you should know this flow chart. Now let us see what is this fibrinolysis. That is the breaking of clot, damaged tissue and endothelium. It is releasing lysosomal enzymes, thrombomodulin plus thrombin. They are combining to form thrombomodulin thrombin complex. Okay, this is acting on protein C, which is found inside the blood vessel. To get like this, thrombomodulin thrombin complex converts protein C to activated protein C. Okay, so finally you will see what a tissue thromboplastin, uh, plasminogen activator beta. Through series of, you just convert all these steps like we do in biochemistry. So it will lead to the formation of lysis. All these chemical substances which are activated step by step, plasminogen to plasmin and all. Finally, they will dissolve the clot. That is the lysis of clot. So this is fibrinolytic mechanism. Okay. So this is the part of question, fibrinolysis. Lysis of blood clot inside the blood vessel is called as fibrinolysis. And it is, of course, just now I told you, no, I gave you one example, transient ischemic attack. If our protective mechanisms were not there, patient should have developed a permanent hemiplegia. But By like we are very lucky to have all these mechanisms, they are actively working so as to resolve small blood clots which are formed in our body in our day-to-day life. Is that clear? Fibrinolytic mechanism, Imad?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, better. Just to complete this topic, see, we also have like normal natural blood is flowing so smoothly. No, we are not finding intravascular clots unless there is some obstruction in the blood vessel. Why is it so? Because we have anticoagulants like heparin, which is present in the blood, which will not allow the blood to clot. Okay, once the lab technician collects the blood outside in the vacutainer, generally we will have ready-made anticoagulants inside so that when the blood is collected, it's not allowed to clot. Okay, but so like that, not only see we have many artificial anticoagulants also apart from heparin. We have coumarin derivatives, we have EDTA, we have citrates, oxalate compounds. This also comes as a 5 marks. Then I will nicely elaborate. For now, you try to learn clotting mechanism thoroughly. Okay. From the other question paper, like I am sharing two question papers because the second essay, what I am finding here is blood pressure. And Abhinav, I will take blood pressure for you later, beta. Like because in the first class I have taken blood pressure. I promise you, definitely I will take that. Okay. Now,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you, beta. So to avoid repetition, I will take the other question here. Like we will go with composition functions of gastric juice and mechanism of secretion of gastric juice.
Ma'am, your voice is breaking.
My voice is breaking. Okay, beta. Gastric juice we are
Ma'am,
going.
your voice is breaking.
Okay. Imad, is it the same with
Yes, ma'am,
you?
it's breaking.
Okay.
No, ma'am, it's fine for me.
For you. Okay. Abhinav, kindly check your net connection, beta. Ritika, is it breaking for you too?
No, ma'am, it's fine.
Okay, beta. Maybe Abhinav, you come in a better internet zone, beta. Okay. Abhinav, try to come in a better
I'm
area.
using Wi-Fi only, ma'am.
Uh, then how come beta the other? Maybe it's, nowadays Wi-Fi also has fluctuations. At my home, my kids
Now
are
it's
also.
audible, ma'am.
Okay, fine, beta. Okay, Ritika, did you open gastric juice? Imad,
Yes, ma'am.
can you please tell me the page number, beta?
Which question, ma'am?
Gastric juice composition, functions, and regulation, beta.
Yes.
Both Ritika and Imad has done GIT with me as separate physiology classes also. For Abhinav, it will be, of course, like for the first time with me. GIT beta, which page number? I didn't note page numbers today. I didn't find time. I was busy. GIT. Abhinav, you also keep searching beta. Whoever opens the page fast will go to that page. GIT, gastrointestinal tract, coming with the stomach gastric juice.
Ma'am, page number 634.
Okay, beta, thank you. 634.
No. Okay. Sorry. I'm using different book. Sorry.
Okay, but that is GIT, right?
Yeah. I opened GK part.
Oh, okay. Try to open Shambhalingam better.
Yes.
230 page number 230. Abhinav Ritika. Okay, see here, beta. Now we are talking about composition, functions, and regulation of gastric juice. Okay, Abhinav, where is the gastric juice released? It is released in the stomach. Stomach anatomy we have done very well, isn't it? Is my voice audible to you now, Abhinav?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, beta. See, if you remember histology part of the stomach, we know like stomach is lined with gastric glands, and gastric glands has many specialized cells like parietal cells, sheath cells, mucous neck cells, isn't it? G cells. So many cells are there. Each cell is very specific and it is releasing a particular type of chemical substance. Okay. Now, for example, chief cells, they are concerned with the release of many enzymes like pepsinogen, renin, lipase, gelatinase, and urines. Parietal cells, these are the characteristic features of the gastric glands of the stomach. They are concerned with the secretion of HCl and also intrinsic factor of casein. What is the importance of this, Imad? Intrinsic factor?
It is helpful for absorption of B12.
Very good. What type of anemia it is preventing?
Pernicious anemia or megaloblastic.
Excellent. Very good, beta. Okay, mucous neck cells, they are releasing mucin, and G cells are releasing hormone gastrin. Enterochromaffin cells, it releases serotonin, and enterochromaffin-like cells, it releases histamine. So all these chemical substances are released from the gastric gland. Okay, now coming to the composition of gastric juice, you have to memorize this table enough. So it has water 99.5%, solids 0.5. So you just split, you memorize this table. The most important, when you go to the functions, you should elaborate on the action of these enzymes on the substrates. Food, we generally, the food is entering into the oral cavity, is thoroughly mixed with the salivary juices, salivary amylase, from there to esophagus. The first entry point for the digestion is stomach only. So we have enzymes like pepsin, like gastric lipase, all these are the enzymes. So I am elaborating to you, try to understand and convert into words. Like pepsin, it is acting on proteins in the presence of HCl to convert them into proteoses, peptones and polypeptides. Similarly, like gastric lipase, it is acting on fats, triglycerides of buffers in the presence of again HCl, and triglycerides are converted to fatty acids and glycerol. Is that okay, Abhinav?
Yes, ma'am.
So in this way, you have to convert this into sentences. So once you know the composition, once you know the functions of gastric juice, so we should know the function of HCl also. So no enzyme is getting activated without the presence of HCl. That means it is activating almost all the enzymes. It is killing the bacteria which is entering into the stomach. It is providing an acid media which is necessary for the action of hormones also, like gastrin hormone and all. Okay, mechanism of secretion of HCl is also very important. Okay, so in the mechanism of secretion, this is parietal cell beta. We know parietal cell is the seat for the production of HCl. This is the lumen of stomach. This is the wall of stomach, and we know the wall of the stomach is lined with gastric glands. One gastric glands contains many type of cells. One such cell is parietal cell. Isn't it? Just now we saw those green cells. Those are inside this cell. What is going on? We are seeing now. So there is a universal formula always. We see carbon dioxide combines with water in the presence of carbonic anhydrous to form carbonic acid H2CO3, which is now splitting to H plus and HCO3 minus. H is going into the lumen of the stomach, and bicarbonate, it is entering into the blood, extracellular fluid. Bicarbonate buffer. Here you can correlate so many other things. We have so much of bicarbonate because our body releases so many acids which has to get neutralized as soon as they are formed. That's why bicarbonate is going to the blood, whereas hydrogen is going into the lumen of stomach. In exchange with bicarbonate, chloride is coming from the blood to the parietal cell. From there, it is entering into the lumen of stomach. So in the lumen of stomach, they get a chance to combine hydrogen plus chloride to form HCl. So this is the mechanism of the secretion of HCl. This is very important. 5 marks question also. Abhinav, is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So then after that, so phases of secretion. See, when is the gastric juice released? See, cephalic phase means when the food bolus is, that means it is related to the head area beta. Gastric phase is related to stomach area and then intestinal phase. So for this we have two reflexes, like conditioned reflex. That means here actual food bolus is not there in the mouth because this is lunchtime, you are thinking about food, sight, smell, thought of food and hearing about food is conditioned reflex. No real food is there in the mouth. Unconditioned means actually you are not too much serious about what you are eating, but there is still food in the mouth. So whether it is conditioned reflex or whether it is unconditioned reflex, the vagus nerve is stimulated and it is allowing the gastric juice to be released in the stomach. Okay, once from the mouth, you see the food passes through the esophagus and enters into the stomach. So again, vagus nerve, the other local nerves and the gastrin hormone stimulates the gastric glands for the release of gastric juice. So stomach, for how long the food is remaining in the stomach? May remain there for 2 to 3 hours, isn't it? So after that, it is now moving from the stomach to the intestines. So in the intestines, we have chyme, that is the partially digested food is actually called as chyme. So there you will see gastrin is there, and also many other local hormones we have from the intestines like secretin, cholecystokinin, pancreozymin, somatostatin, okay, vasoactive intestinal peptide, okay. All these enzymes, gastric inhibitory peptide, they say like it is enough, no more gastric juice is required, because the action of gastric juice is required only in stomach. Now food has moved into intestine, so they stop the secretion of gastric juice. Okay, as long as gastrin is there, then only you will see the secretion of gastric juice. Remaining all chemical substances stop the production of gastric juice. Okay, so that is regulation of gastric juice, that is second step. Then just to complete this, generally we have this applied physiology. In applied physiology, we have gastritis. Gastritis means stimulation, like irritation of gastric mucosa. Okay, inflammation of gastric mucosa is gastritis. Okay, I'm giving very much small outline only. Gastric atrophy. Atrophy means shrinking of stomach. Okay, peptic ulcer. If you see what is peptic ulcer, beta? If you see the ulcers along the lesser curvature of stomach and first part of the duodenum, we call it as peptic ulcer. Individually in the stomach, you call it as gastric ulcer. Individually in the duodenum, we call it as duodenal ulcer. Together, that means gastric plus duodenal. Together, we call it as peptic ulcer. Okay, like that 2 to 3 applied aspects also we can try. Okay, that finishes the second essay. Then so we have seen composition, functions, mechanism. Everything we have covered. Now we are coming to digestive lipases. This also has come yesterday in biochemistry. We will see questions which are repeated. I'll take from the other paper. So digestive lipases. From where have you? This chapter only you have to use to study this answer. Last chapters of GIT. Digestion of lipids. I'll show you the table. You just Ritika and Imad have written GIT exam also, I remember, right? With me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, nice, very good. Okay, okay. See, now he is asking us the digestion of lipids. Abhinav, you just try to memorize this table. This is for digestion of lipids. So digestion of lipids is actually starting in the mouth. In the saliva, we have lingual lipase. Okay, from the mouth, the food is moving to stomach. There we have so many lipid digesting enzymes. From there, the food is moving to small intestines. There also we have so many fat digesting enzymes. Okay, so like for example, in the saliva, we have lingual lipase, which is converting the triglycerides to fatty acids and 1,2-diacylglycerol. Like that, we have gastric juice, gastric lipase converts triglycerides to fatty acids and glycerol, and so on. Beta, Abhinav. Okay, you learn this table thoroughly, you will be able to frame the sentences, and that is your complete answer. They will give you 4.5 out of 5. Nothing to worry. This is the
Yes, ma'am.
complete. Okay. Then next question we'll see. Okay. Plasma clearance, I just told yesterday to Imad and Ritika. Isn't it better?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm just skipping. Abhinav, I will tell you later. Better you note down whatever I'm not telling you. because you have missed 2 classes of physiology, no? That's why. Make a note, I will explain you later. Plasma clearance, lymphocytes, okay. Dead space. We'll go. These lymphocytes also last class I have told you. Instead, I'll take the other questions from the other paper, don't worry. So we are excluding 2 questions here. 2 questions I will include from the other paper. Okay. Physiological dead space and anatomical dead space we will see in respiratory system beta, I'll tell you. Respiratory system. Check in your textbooks. Meanwhile, I will also open. First chapter only, second, third chapters we have there. Respiratory system, dead space we have. 673 page. If it is my edition, 673 page. Yeah, closely. Okay, but you see, first look at the respiratory system because we have physiological and anatomical dead spaces. First of all, let us try to appreciate the parts of respiratory system just as a review. I know everybody knows we have nose, nasopharynx, isn't it? After nasopharynx, the air is entering into larynx, from there into trachea, and we know trachea it is bifurcating into right and left principal bronchus. That means primary bronchus, after that secondary bronchus, then tertiary bronchus, then bronchioles. We have 2 types of bronchioles, no? Do you remember? Terminal bronchioles, respiratory bronchioles, no? Then after respiratory bronchioles, we have alveolar ducts, alveolar sacs and true alveoli, isn't it? So that means these are the parts of respiratory system. So now let us see up to which part you call it as dead space. Is that all right, beta? You understood the names?
Yes, ma'am.
Recollected, nice. Thank you, beta. Now let us see uh, dead space. Anybody is having the same edition which I am using? Imad, is it the same, beta?
I think it's similar only, same only, ma'am.
Because if it is same edition, we have the same page numbers. Did you get the page number?
Ma'am, what is your page number?
675. I have to still search the answer, beta. That's the reason I'm asking you.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, we'll try to check our editions. Is it 6th edition with you? Imad?
8th edition, ma'am. No, I have 8th edition.
Oh, so page numbers. Abhinav, which edition do you have? I know Ritika's edition, that's why I'm not asking. Ritika also has different edition. Abhinav,
Ma'am,
which
7th edition.
Oh, all 3 of us have a different edition. No, no problem. Okay, dead space. Check. You open your respective pages. I will open my corresponding page. Dead space. For my book, it is 701 beta. Okay, no problem. Even one book is enough. Meanwhile, you open in your book. 0.01. Yes, better. Dead space. You just look at the screen. You need not worry about anything. See, dead space is defined as the part of respiratory tract where gases exchange is not taking place. Okay, so it can be anatomical dead space or physiological. So anatomical dead space is coming till terminal bronchiole beta. Till terminal bronchiole, it is only conduction of air. Only air is moving there. There is no exchange of gases. Do you remember the histology of respiratory bronchiole alveolus? It is lined with simple squamous epithelium. Only one line, same like capillary. Simple squamous epithelium, and that alveolus will be surrounded with capillary. So capillary also one single line, simple squamous epithelium of endothelial cells. That single line of cells will facilitate the exchange of gases. Okay, so that means from the nose till the respiratory bronchiole, we do not have any exchange of gas. Okay, up to the terminal bronchioles. From respiratory bronchiole alveoli, we have the exchange of gases. So then coming to physiological dead space, so it includes anatomical dead space. Then we have another two volumes also. What are those? So we will see that. See, air in the alveoli which are not functioning. So there are some alveoli because of some disease, you will see they will be collapsed, because of which they will not be functioning. You cannot take all the alveoli as working, no? So that's why you are calculating in this way. So you have to exclude non-functioning alveoli because of underlying diseases, obstructive diseases. Then air in the alveoli which do not receive adequate blood flow. Okay, so except these two factors, whatever alveoli which are actively involved in exchange of gases will be involved in the exchange of gases. Remaining all will be included under physiological dead space. That means from nose to the which bronchiole beta? Terminal bronchiole. Okay, we will have only conduction of air. There is no exchange of gases. Including to that anatomical dead space, you should also add two more things. Non-functioning alveoli plus alveoli which is not receiving adequate blood supply. So this will make physiological dead space. So that's how we have anatomical and physiological dead spaces. Okay. So what is the importance of this dead space? The more non-functioning area, the reduced is the capacity of the lung, isn't it? That means the oxygen which is going to the tissues will be less. Okay, that is the importance. That is wasted ventilation. It's the volume of air that ventilates physiological dead space. So air is going there, but it is not involved in exchange. That means air is unable to enter into the capillaries. That's why it is called as wasted ventilation, because it is not utilized for gases exchange. Okay. So dead space is generally considered as wasted air only. Okay. So then normal value, see volume of normal dead space is 150 ml. Under normal condition, physiological dead space is equal to anatomical dead space. That means our lung should be completely functional, which is highly impossible better. There will be 100% some alveoli which will not be functioning due to some external factors, pollution or something, isn't it? So that is highly impossible. That's why it is not always the same. Okay. So it is because all the alveoli, that is not actually like physiological dead space increases during respiratory diseases. That